Hello, and welcome to Making Waves to Move to Joy, a series of mini webinars where Johanna and Marie get real about the ebb and flow of finding lasting joy and happiness as women and as leaders. So, we're here to help you get the most value from this session. If you joined because you want to understand why you've lost your joy, you want to see a clear path towards regaining your spark, love live sessions, and learn how to sustain it in your work, you are in the right place. So, over this six-part webinar series here in season two, you'll gain insights into what's blocking your joyful career path. And at the end of each session, you'll get practical tips to apply the lessons and an invitation to connect with us to explore your personalized path to joy. And while we have some returning attendees and viewers who have seen us throughout season one and season two, I know we have some new people here today. So, Johanna, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Marie. So I'm Johanna Danaher, and I help people who are in transition, right? Whether that's in their career or whether that's in their life, sort of get out of survival mode and into the next chapter that actually feels grounded, that feels real, that feels energizing. So as a career and energy coach, I focus on helping people strengthen confidence, find clarity, and make decisions that protect their well being while moving themselves forward. And through my Waves transformation journey, we reflect on your values, your strengths, and your energy. So, what actually comes next works for you. And what about you, Marie?
Yeah, so I am also a career coach, but I kind of like to look at it as a possibility partner. So I am all about helping you find hope and joy. And I specifically work with women whose current job is really draining their soul, which a lot of us have been there. And they really want work that will fill their hearts as well as their wallet, but they aren't really sure what that is or how to make that happen. So we use my Move to Joy framework as a guide, and we really start to discover their purpose and the passion that energize them. And then we apply my proprietary map process to really start to find the practical solutions, unique strategies, and tactics that will help them have joy in their work and in their life. All right, so let's get started with today's episode. And
Yes. So excited for this conversation, Marie, right? Because oftentimes we've been taught to sort of measure progress through outcomes, the grade, the review, the promotion, the number on the scale, the revenue. But it's actually mastery that allows us to truly find that joy and that success. And what we're here today to talk all about is how having a mastery mindset really creates that joy, that energy, and that sustainable growth more so than that sort of performance or results only mindset ever could. So I'm curious if you could, talk a little bit about how you see this myth or this experience showing up with your clients.
yeah, so this is one that I relate to personally, right? I was always chasing the grade, chasing the financial goal, right? Always chasing the outcome. And then in my clients, I see this a lot as well. And this particular client that I'm thinking of, we'll call her Denise. She has a successful career at a large tech firm. She had this goal to retire by 50. She had just turned 40, and her career was making money, but not quite enough for them to have the lifestyle they wanted now and also be able to retire at 50. So they're looking for that residual income and that extra little side hustle. So they were chasing a business and a side hustle and all these other things to invest in so they could build out and manage and then eventually sell or turn over those businesses, so that they could actually retire and spend time together, Denise and her partner, when they went to retire at 50.
Yeah, yeah, right. So it sounds like they had some, targeted goals that they were working for. They had a very specific outcome that they were driving towards. They were really operating in a way that was, focused on achieving that outcome. But tell me a little bit more about, what was going on for this client.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? They had this revenue goal, this recurring revenue goal that they were striving so hard to get to by 50. And it seemed like a good strategy, right? Everything I talked about, having a good corporate job, having a side hustle, having a business that creates recurring income, all of those things are what we're taught to do. So it wasn't a bad strategy, but they were overwhelmed with decisions, small decisions, large decisions. Everything they did, they were focused on, will this hit our outcome? Will this hit our outcome? And that stress was really impacting their mental health and their physical health. They were ending up exhausted. And worse than that, it was impacting their relationship health. So for them, the whole reason they wanted to retire early was so they could travel. And yet they were drawing farther away from each other in this process instead of feeling more connected to each other. So even though they had a shared goal, the stress of how they were going about chasing that outcome, that anxiety around creating that number in their current bank account and the retirement account was really just causing them to not have what they ultimately wanted.
Oh, and that's so interesting, right? Because what I'm hearing you talk about is that they were so focused on this sort of long-term aspirational goal that they were missing what was happening in the moment. And what was happening in the moment was causing, this sort of physical and emotional and relational impact on their well-being across all of those factors. And I'm curious, what was the story that they were telling themselves, right? You're sort of talking a little bit about the fact that they, were working so hard towards this outcome, but why were they doing that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's the story they were telling themselves. And then as we started to break apart that story, right, what they learned and then how they took that new learning into their lives. So for them, they had that outcome goal. If I can become financially secure, life will be perfect. I can have my dream life and take it easy if I just hustle now. And that's exactly where so many of us are. So with Denise, what we did was we prioritized some specific revenue things. So she wasn't focused all over the place and constantly getting distracted and not making even those outcomes that she wanted. But then we also focused on specific relationship goals. And so instead of measuring success by the number in her bank account, we started measuring it by her effort around time and activity in the area she was trying to pursue financially, but also with her relationships. And so we created strategies around how to manage stress from the job so that they could make sure that, yes, they're paying their current bills because they needed their corporate jobs because that was paying the bills. But how did they manage that so they didn't end that day working at the corporate job exhausted and not having that energy, right? You talk a lot about your energy, and I do as well in my work. You leave your corporate job at the end of the day and you're just exhausted. So we created some strategies to manage that. We then set aside some activity time every day for things that weren't involving work or necessarily even their next business. So we did put some time boxes in there. And then instead of tracking that number in the bank account, which Lord knows the economy, right, can really influence those numbers. So outcomes can't be guaranteed. So what we started tracking was what was accomplished. And some of those accomplishments were quite small. I ruled out two businesses today. I made one phone call today. And so instead of looking at the outcome of that phone call, or I haven't picked a business yet, it was what progress did we make? And then most importantly, we put into place a quiet practice of becoming the person they wanted to be now, creating the life they want now, so that when they did reach their financial goals, they weren't alone. So spending time carving out time every week purposely to spend time with her partner, to cherish those moments now, day to day, so that they have the emotional resources to create the finances, really focusing on the process of becoming who they wanted to be rather than focusing on the end outcome. So, Johanna, that's Denise's story. Where do you see your clients dealing with this idea of creating an outcome?
Yeah, so honestly, like you, I see it in myself as much as in the clients that I work with. And, for me, having spent, 25 years in corporate HR, the flavor that I run into the most is about promotions, right? If I get the title, the next rung on the ladder, the recognition of the work that I'm doing, people convince themselves that they'll finally feel like the real thing once they have the title. And so one particular client that comes to mind, and we'll call her Stacy, she was a mid-level manager at a fast-growing, pharmaceutical firm. She was brilliant. She was very hardworking, and she was absolutely convinced that the senior director position, that promotion was the one thing that was standing between her and the life she wanted. She had been passed over once already, and she had turned that sort of into a mission. I'm going to get the director promotion. Once I have that promotion, I will be happy and fulfilled.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of us, either that we're in the corporate world, is if I can just get that next promotion, life will be grand.
I'll have
So
made it.
yes, so tell me a little bit about Stacy and her quest for this promotion.
Yeah, so on the surface, right, she was like seemingly doing everything right. She was saying yes to every project, yes to every opportunity, yes to every growth experience. She was staying late. She was working hard. She was volunteering for the big projects, the visible work, the stretch things, the committees, the employee resource groups. If there was a way to prove herself, she took it. And from the outside, it looked like that ambition was sort of paying off. She was tapped to do things. But underneath all of that, she was running on empty. She was exhausted. She was snapping at her team. She was second guessing every decision. She was coming home completely flat and unable to engage with her children and with her spouse. So she was really trying to figure out how could she actually balance her ambition and her experience. She was pushing herself harder and harder and harder because she felt like if she finally got there, everything would be calm and she would be settled and it would feel like she was in balance. But the harder she pushed, the further it seemed to drift away from her. And worse, the things that she really truly actually wanted, to feel like she belonged at the table, to feel respected, she actually started to feel less and less of it. She started to get feedback that she was not listening to her team. She was getting insights from, the company that she was sort of failing to deliver on some of the big projects. So she was producing more and more and more, but she was feeling less and less and less, right? She was getting things done, but the way in which she was getting them done was not sustainable and was certainly not serving her well.
Yeah. And so when you say that about Stacy, right? Your Stacy, my client Denise, both of them had that idea that if I can just get this one thing, this
Mhm.
one outcome, life will be grand. And
Yeah.
they both were having some of that family stress as they were striving for those things at work that were kind of undermining some of their other things that they really valued. So we talked a
Yeah.
little bit about the story my client was telling herself. What was your client Stacy telling her stuff?
So there's two of them actually, and they're kind of tangled together. The first was, as you said, it's like once I have the title, then I'll be taken seriously and respected. And if I just do more than everyone else, I'll prove I deserve it. And then I can finally relax, right? So she was caught between sort of almost two different ways of operating. And many of us are. They're what I like to call the have, be, do, and the do, have, be, right? Um, if I have what I'm aiming for, then I'll do what I need and I'll be happy. Or if I do more, I'll have what I want and I'll be satisfied, right? And it's actually not that at all, right? And what I worked with this client particularly on was flipping that question, not once I have the title, then I'll be happy, but something very, very different.
Yeah. And so what sort of things did you and Stacy kind of work on in order to kind of untangle all of that?
Yeah, so we actually looked at these two models, right? Have, be, do, and do, have, be. And we actually mapped how she was operating against both of those. And then we actually looked at what would it look like if we actually started with be. Who do I need to be in the moment right now? Just like you talked about with Denise, right? Who do I have to be in order to then take actions that are aligned with who I am to ultimately then have the outcome and the life and the goal that I'm aiming for. So we flipped that question. Not what do I need to do to get promoted, and not what do I need to have before I'll feel successful, but who would I be if I already was operating and living the life I want to live. And then we started practicing being that person right now. So instead of measuring success by whether the title came, we measured it by how she was showing up, how she was speaking in the meetings, how she was leading others, how she was setting boundaries, how she was showing up for her family. Did she, develop someone else on her team instead of doing it all by herself? Did she come home at the end of the day energized to be with her family and be present? Or was she still running that script and thinking about all the things she needed to prove in order to get that promotion? So the quiet work that we did was simply letting her be a leader, to be present, to be herself. And once she was being that person, the results actually took care of themselves. By the time it came and she did receive that promotion, it almost wasn't the point anymore. She had already become the person she wanted to be without waiting for the title to make her that person.
Yeah. And that's so powerful, that idea of being who you want to be and having the mindset and beginning to live that person. And then the outcomes kind of flow from that. And we saw that both with your client as she worked through a work conundrum, and my client who came to me with what seemed to be a business conundrum, but actually was a family priority, a being in that relationship and being at work for your client. So, for those who are attending today, Johanna, what are some ways they might be able to flip from focusing on the outcome, that idea of have or do, and flip the script and become and focus on that be part of the equation?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to really, take some time to self-reflect on, one goal in your life that you have and really look at, are you focusing in on the process of being, right? Or are you focused on the outcome, the have? Really reflect. Where are we being present? Where are we focusing on those small actions every day? Where are we focusing on being who we need to be versus focused on that, outcome that we can't, really necessarily control or guarantee? What's another
Yeah.
tip?
Well, and that's really powerful. I like how you said pick one goal, right? Because like so many things, if we try and do the whole thing at once, it's overwhelming. And so I think the second tip really builds on that first one. Once you've picked one goal, started to break it apart and see where should you be instead of have or do, like start to track it. And we're so used to tracking the outcome. Did I get the promotion? Did the business make money? Right? Did I get my exercise in today? Did I lose weight? Right? Everybody, we all as women are, feel like we're constantly on that health battle, right? But start to track the process. So, as your client did I delegate in the meeting? Was I present when I was talking to employees? For my client, it was, did we schedule time to go do an activity we both enjoy this week and actually keep that commitment to go spend that time together? And you can apply that really to anything and just track that result for 30 days. Not result, use the wrong word there. Track the activity. Was I the person I needed to be? And then see where you are in 30 days because you might be surprised. And so, what's a third tip, Johanna?
The third one, I think, builds all on everything we've talked about and on these two. You're talking about sort of tracking that activity, right? And how we're being in the moment for those 30 days. And it's also while we're doing that, it's to review our energy and our emotions related to that goal. Are we truly being and becoming the person instead of just grabbing for the outcome? How are we feeling, right? Are we energized? Are we depleted? If we're depleted, that's probably signaling to us that we might have sort of fallen back into that trap of looking at the outcome as opposed to being. And when I say and think about the energy and the emotions, I always like to use for myself and even with clients an I am statement, right? So I am a leader. I am fully present with my family, right? So it's almost manifesting all of what we're talking about, right? I am happy. Not I will be happy when I get. I am happy now. I am happy. I am being the person I need to be. I am.
So that's pretty powerful there. So, as we start to wrap up, Johanna, so we both focus on working with people going through major transitions, specifically around their careers or other major issues in their life. So tell us a little bit about who you work with, Johanna, and how we might be able to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I primarily work with early talent, recent college graduates who are starting their first careers, right? Setting themselves up for success as they enter into the workforce, really being proactive about setting their boundaries and knowing how they can be the person and the leader they want to be as they enter into the workforce. And I also work with those who are pre-retirement planning for their next phase as they exit the workforce and really being intentional about who they want to be in that next chapter. How do they want their retirement to feel, to look? How do they want to approach that new stage, that fourth chapter? So I start with the first inning, right, when we're entering the workforce, and I close with the fourth inning when we're entering our retirement phase. And what about you, Marie?
Yeah, so I work with the middle. Um, so I work with people who are generally mid-career. Um, so 35 to 55 is kind of the age range that my clients tend to show up as. And they are really looking for a significant career pivot. They want more joy, less stress. They want work that aligns with their mission, their values. They want to leave a legacy or an impact. And really, one of the things I've done to help embody that, we were talking about like tracking mastery versus outcomes, right? On my financial dashboard, I have a spot for was I joyful this week? Because that's a value of mine. And so, one of the things I work with clients on is helping them find what brings them joy and how do we be the person that needs to embody that so that they can have and do. So you can reach me at www.movetojoycoaching.com, and that's move to joy coaching. Um, so that's how they reach out to us. And Johanna, what are we talking about next?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our next episode is going to wrap up this season with another sort of myth that many of us wrestle with. It's the belief that leadership means staying composed, unfazed, and endlessly capable, especially when the pace accelerates or emotions run high. So, it's this idea of presence over busyness. So, we're looking forward to connect with everyone on this journey back to joy. So, again, you can reach Marie at movetojoycoaching.com. You can reach me at anchor2aspire.com. And we will see you on our next session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to our next conversation.
Bye, everybody.